Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of What If Naruto Became a Psycho Killer. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 4. Gifts. The paint faded after a week, much to the relief of Team 8, 7 and Zabuza, who had to walk around for a week looking like clowns. Haku was doing well. The doctors were confident that she would make a full recovery and would be allowed to leave in a few days. Much to the relief of Zabuza, who had not left Haku's side the entire time they had been in the village. Also to the relief of Sasuke, not that he would tell anyone. He had been spending all his spare time with Haku. Whenever he wasn't training he was with her and, because he never left, Zabuza. Team 8 were currently at their training ground, working on teamwork. Kurenai had told them about the Chunin exam the day before and they were all looking forward to proving themselves. They all signed the forms instantly and now had 2 months to prepare, and they weren't wasting a moment of it. It was while they were training that something strange happened that, for once, had nothing to do with Naruto. Out of nowhere a ball shot into the training ground and exploded. When the smoke cleared it revealed a large banner that was being held up by the kunai stuck into 2 separate trees. The banner read in large bold letters, presenting the sexy and single Mitarashi Anko. They could all hear Kurenai groan in exasperation. Then a blur landed in front of the banner. Hinata's face turned a bright red and smoke could be seen coming out of her ears. Shino just stood there, not moving, but they could all see the blood stain that was growing on the front of his collar. Naruto however just laughed at his teammates' reactions. Standing before them was a beautiful woman. She looked to be in her early 20s or late teens, had purple hair and pupil-less brown eyes. But the thing that drew the most attention was the way she was dressed. She was wearing a tight mesh bodysuit and a burnt orange skirt that barely covered her womanhood, and over it was a light tan trench coat. All in all, she was hot and wasn't trying to hide it. Smirking at the genin, she frowned when her eyes landed on Naruto. Walking up and getting right in his face, her frown deepened and she turned to Kurenai. Hey Nai-chan, your kid is broken. Kurenai just rolled her eyes at her friend's antics. Did it ever occur to you that he just isn't a pervert? Anko gave her a blank look. No. Turning back to the boy, Anko walked in a circle around him, looking him all over. Naruto just stood there, giggling to himself. When she finished looking him over, Anko walked back in front of him and put her face inches away from his own. You gay. Nope. You. Anko just grinned. Don't get fresh with me, brat. Do you know who I am? From the sign I would guess Mitarashi Anko, snake mistress of Konoha. If you're going to ask that question you shouldn't make a big sign with your name on it. They could all see the tick mark that appeared on Anko's forehead. What would you know? When you're someone as great and sexy as me you need to announce it to the world. But if that was true then why would you need to point it out to people? They should already know. The two stared at each other for a long minute. It was then that Anko took notice of the kunai in the blonde's hands. It was longer than the normal standard kunai, and was made of a lighter metal. Trying to think of where she had seen it before, it hit her like a ton of bricks. It was hers. Grabbing the kunai out of his hands and cradling it like a newborn baby, Anko sent a suspicious look out of the corner of her eye. When the hell did you take my kunai? And for that matter, why didn't I notice? The grin that came over the blonde's face worried even Anko for a second, but it didn't last long. Did you know you forgot to put on a shirt today? All those in the training ground except Naruto and Anko face faulted. Turning to her friend again, Anko very loudly asks. Is he an idiot or something? I really don't know, your guess is as good as anyone else. Turning back to the blonde, Anko gave him another suspicious look. What's your name, brat? Again, Naruto just grinned and pointed to her sign, which now read, the sexy and insane Uzumaki Naruto, with a drawing of a chibi Naruto grinning and giving a peace sign. They all looked from the sign to the blonde several times, wondering when he had changed the sign. Then, out of nowhere, Anko burst out laughing. She was soon joined in by Naruto. They stood there laughing for a good 10 minutes, but what scared Team 8 the most was the fact that Anko had a similar laugh to Naruto. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was enough for them to be worried. Finally getting a hold of herself, Anko patted Naruto on the back. "You're all right, kid. Hey Nai-chan, why didn't you introduce us earlier?" Shaking her head, the red-eyed Jonin locked a blank look on her friend. The Hokage, council and all the Jonin of the village agreed that it was safer for the village if you two never met. Both raised an eyebrow at that, and then grinned at each other. So people didn't want them to meet. This could be fun. Getting a bad feeling, Kurenai quickly changed the subject. "So why are you here, Anko? I thought you were working with Ibiki all day." Facing her longtime friend, Anko pouted. "Old Scarface said I needed a vacation, so I thought I would come and see you." Walking up to her, Anko threw her arm around Kurenai's neck. "Tonight you, Hana, your 3 brats and I are hitting the town." Anko was curious when she saw 3 of the 4 people stood around her pale. "No." Anko was a little taken aback when they shouted at the same time, casting scared looks towards the blonde, who just grinned back at them. "Okay. That was weird. XXX. They still ended up going out that night, even after they explained what had happened in Wave. If anything, it seemed to make Anko more eager to go. Hana couldn't make it, so it was just the 5 of them. Team 8 kept giving Naruto worried looks throughout the night, counting how much he drank and ready to run the second he did something. But nothing happened. For the whole night, Anko and Naruto could be seen laughing and talking. They had been thrown out of several bars for starting fights with other people, but nothing overly crazy happened. The two talked and laughed long into the night, even after the others went home. And the next morning the village awoke to the sight of the Hokage monument painted. They had all been painted to look more real, but each had a little quirk. The Shodaime had a picture of a naked woman next to his head and his eyes closed and a blush across his face. The Nadaime and Sandaime both had perverted looks on their faces and drool falling out of their mouths, and the Yondaime was looking the opposite way at another picture of a naked man with a curious look on his face. The villagers were outraged at the blatant disrespect shown towards the Hokages and demanded that the ones responsible were punished. They all knew it was Naruto, and after Kurenai talked to the Hokage, Anko, but no one could find them. It also soon became clear that they had used the same paint Naruto had in Wave. No matter how hard they tried, it wouldn't come off. Throughout the day, several people were caught victim to traps set around the village, from pitfalls to paint bombs. It took the Anbu most of the day to find and deactivate the traps. However, they didn't seem to mind it. When the Hokage asked them why, an Anbu in a bear mask and a white hooded cloak answered. "The fact that they got around us and set the traps shows we need to improve internal defenses. If they were an enemy, they could have planted exploding tags instead of paint bombs." Seeing his point, Sarutobi agreed to let them rearrange the village defenses so they could avoid it happening again. But they still couldn't find Naruto or Anko. XXX. Nobody saw much of Naruto for the next few weeks. He would show up to team training, but other than that he was hardly seen. Kurenai had gone to Higashi a few times only to be told that he had just left. She, Hinata and Shino had tried to follow him several times, but he always gave them the slip. They would have asked a villager if they knew where he was, but the only answer they ever got was harsh glares and a few murmurs about stupid demon brats, so they stopped trying. Team 8 were currently in the Hokage office, Sarutobi looking at them with a worried expression on his aged face. They had been called because of something that had happened during their mission to Wave that they didn't know about until now. Apparently one of the Silent had witnessed the battle at the bridge when Naruto had massacred Gato and his men. The Silent were a neutral organization ran by people that worked for all the daimyos in the elemental nations as scouts for the bingo book. They would travel around the nations observing ninja, and whenever they found someone of note they would send their information to be printed in the monthly updates. The reason that they were called the Silent was because no one had ever actually seen one. Nobody knew what they looked like, and nobody would know they were there until the bingo book came out. They were both feared and respected by all the shinobi villages for their skills. As no one has ever found one, their base of operation had never been found, and it had been that way for as long as the group had existed, and that had been since before the first Great Shinobi War. The problem was that the Silent that had witnessed the fight at the bridge had thought Naruto impressive enough to add him in the latest update. Shortly after they had arrived, Sarutobi never said a word and had simply taken out the book, turned to a specific page and handed to Kurenai to show them. At seeing the entry in the book, Naruto had just laughed with a grin that reached from ear to ear. Name: Uzumaki Naruto. Age: 12. Alias: Horror of the Bloody Leaf, True Horror of Konohagakure. Village: Konohagakure. Rank: Genin. Status: Active. Skill level: High B. Taijutsu: Unknown. Ninjutsu: Unknown. Genjutsu: Unknown. Kenjutsu: Unknown. Ceiling: Unknown. Description: Uzumaki-san showed great power and skill with an unknown jutsu and is believed to be able to use a, until now, thought to be impossible ability to physically transform his body. It is unknown if this is by the use of a new bloodline or jutsu. He is also able to perform the shadow clone jutsu to a degree far beyond what was believed to be possible. During observation, he was seen making 1,000 shadow clones and transforming them into an army of demons, which he named as the Parade of 1,000 Demons. The result of this was the complete slaughter of 984 bandits that were in the employ of one Gato, from Gato Shipping Company, and the man himself. At one point just before the battle, he was also seen stopping a Chidori from the famed Hitaki Kakashi with his bare hands and suffering no ill effects. After the incident, he was seen removing the heads of all the bandits and put them on pikes surrounding the village and claimed it as under his protection. It is believed that due to his actions observed during and after the incident that his mental state should be in question, as he appeared to be enjoying himself while he killed. This was deduced from the laughter that was heard. In conclusion, Uzumaki Naruto has proven himself dangerous and is believed to have no regard for human life. It is advised for anyone under Jonin level not to engage until more information has been gained or he is approached in a group of 9 Chunin. Any less in rank or numbers should run instead of engaging. At the top of the page was a picture of Naruto, which looked like it had been taken just after the battle when he had changed back to normal. It showed him covered from head to toe in blood, surrounded by what was left of Gato's thugs and a dark, insane grin on his face with his hair covering the top of his eyes. In his hand they could see the decapitated head of Gato still dripping blood on the ground. It seemed to fit the blonde perfectly, the way it caught his grin and the look in his eyes, the fact that he was surrounded by the dead. It just fit. It also showed a picture of Naruto's mark, the demonized smiley face. After reading the entry, Kurenai had taken to having the same worried look on her face as the Hokage. It was rare for a genin to be added to the bingo book, and most Chunin didn't get as high a skill level as Naruto now had. The fact that he had been given a do not engage was also rare. The problem with this was that it would generate a lot of attention. The fact that it said not to engage if below Jonin would mean nothing to most. They would come looking to challenge Naruto to prove themselves. The only good that would come of this would be that the village would get a lot of publicity. The other thing that worried Sarutobi was the names they had given him. The True Horror of Konoha and the Horror of the Bloody Leaf hit a bit too close to home for the aged Hokage. It was just before he was about to send them out that Naruto spoke. "Oh, old man, before I forget, how soon can you arrange a meeting for the Shinobi Council?" Looking at the blonde curiously, the old man checked a few papers on his desk before turning back to him. "If it's important, then I can arrange it for this evening, but if not, it might be hard to get them to come." Naruto just grinned. "Tell them the faceless blacksmith has made the clans a present." This made all those in the room grin along with the blonde. XXX. It was easier than Sarutobi thought to get the clans to meet. The second he had mentioned the faceless blacksmith, they had been all too ready to agree. Suum had arrived at the training ground Naruto had asked them to meet 2 hours ago. By the time Sarutobi got there himself, he was the last to arrive. Even Shikaku had come early. "Right, well, you all know why we are here." It was here that Suum finally lost her temper. "For the love of Kami, get to the point, Hiruzen." Nodding his head at the dog-like woman, Sarutobi turned towards the trees at the edge of the training ground. "You better come out before Miss Inuzuka breaks something. Spoil sport." From behind a large oak tree came Naruto, a large scroll in his hands. Without saying a word, the young blonde walked over to the group and looked at the shocked faces of the Inuzuka, Yamanaka, Akamichi and Nara clan heads. The first to get over her shock was Sume. You're the faceless blacksmith. Yep. You mean that it was you the whole time? Yep. And you're only telling us now. If I throw you a stick, will you shut the hell up? What the hell did you just say? I said if I throw you a stick, will you shut the hell up? Why the hell do people always ask me to repeat myself? Before Sume could leap at Naruto and try to strangle him, Sarutobi decided that it was time for him to intervene. Enough, Sume. Naruto asked you all here for a reason, or at least I hope he did. The last part was more for himself than the others. Pouting like a child, the brash Inuzuka stepped back, mumbling under her breath. Putting the scroll on the ground in front of him, Naruto opened it out for all to see the storage seals inside. Let's see, which to show you first. Running a finger over the many seals on the scroll, he came to a stop at one in the middle. Here we go. Quickly applying chakra to the seal, they all waited for the smoke to clear, and when it did, all their jaws dropped. In the blonde's hands was the most beautifully carved bow they had ever seen. It was 5 foot in length and, like all of Naruto's weapons, had a maze of complicated seals carved into it. The wood was stained a dark, almost black brown, and the ends had small, one-sided kunai-like blades and were made out of a silver metal that caught the light of the afternoon sun. The middle of the bow was wrapped in a silver-colored leather, and printed on it was the symbol of the Yamanaka clan. Walking up to his fellow blonde, Naruto adapted his serious face and handed him the bow. Inoichi marveled at the bow in his hands, but that soon turned to confusion. Seeing the look on the older man's face, Naruto explained. Let me guess, you're wondering why there are no arrows. At his nod, Naruto grinned and went on. You don't need them. Taking the bow back from Inoichi, Naruto pulled back the string and took aim at a log in the middle of the training ground about 20 feet from where they were all standing. They all gasped as a glowing blue arrow made from what looked like pure chakra appeared in Naruto's hand. Letting the arrow go, they all watched as it flew towards the log, only for it to disappear mid-flight. Suddenly a small, deep hole appeared in the wood. Lowering the bow, Naruto turned back to the shocked face of Inoichi. By channeling your chakra through the seals on the bow, it automatically shapes it into an arrow. As soon as you let it go, it fades from the view of the naked eye, although a Hyuga would be able to see it, and someone with sensor ability could probably feel it coming. Also, I made it work in conjunction with your family jutsu. By adding chakra into your clan seal, it has the same effect as hitting someone with your mind derangement technique or mind-body change technique, and will increase the distance your jutsu can travel. You will need to verbalize the jutsu though. His eyes widening at what he was being told, the older blonde took the offered bow. Turning back to his scroll, Naruto again trailed his figure along the seals until he came to the one he was looking for. When the smoke cleared this time, it was to reveal a long metal chain with a head-sized steel ball at one end and a hoop at the other. What surprised them was that the chain itself also had seals carved into each link that made it up, and at the center of the ball was the clan symbol of the Akamichi. Stepping towards Naruto, Shuza took the ball in one hand and the chain in the other to examine it. Impressive, but the ball on the end is a bit small, don't you think? Grinning, Naruto told the large man to channel his chakra through the chain and into the ball. Doing as he was told, he was surprised when the ball tripled in size, yet didn't seem to gain any weight. I took the basic idea of your clan's expansion jutsu and applied it to the ball and chain. It only seems like it hasn't gained weight because it's your chakra that's making it grow, and if you dropped it on the floor, it would more than likely leave a good-sized dent. I don't actually know the limit on how big it can get, but if you go full-sized, it should change with you. Without giving Shuza a chance to respond, Naruto turned back to his scroll and released another seal. Walking up to Sume, Naruto presented her with a pair of gauntlets. They were made of a strange black metal and had been molded into the shape of wolf heads with their mouths open and fangs barred. The detail was so good they almost looked alive. The seals that covered them were just as intricate as the others, and the Inuzuka clan symbol was etched into the eyes of the wolf. She took the gloves from the blonde and without a second thought slipped them on her hands and channeled her chakra through the seals. As soon as she did this, the mouths of the wolves closed shut with a loud snap. As you can see, the idea is that you can use them to grab your opponent. They close with enough force to snap bones in one go. Also, you can slip them back up your wrist so you can use your hands for your clan jutsu. This time, before he could turn back to the scroll, he was grabbed in a bear hug by Sum, who then proceeded to give the blonde a deep kiss on the lips. The eyes of all those watching widened and they suppressed their laughs that threatened to erupt from their throats at the shocked look on Naruto's face. As soon as she let him go, he backed off so he was out of reaching distance and mumbled under his breath just loud enough for them to hear. "If she hears about this, she'll cut my nuts off, again." Realizing he said that out loud, Naruto quickly moved back to the scroll and released the next seal. What surprised them was that when the smoke cleared, there wasn't a weapon but clothes. There was a long-sleeved shirt, ninja pants, socks, sandals, gloves, and what appeared to be a mask without eye holes. They were made of a thin, black material so dark that it seemed to draw in the light around it like a black hole. The only color other than black was the seals, which had been sewn on in a deep blood red, and on the back of the shirt was the symbol of the Nara clan. Shikaku looked over the clothes with a critical eye before letting out a sigh. What are they for? Put them on." Shrugging his shoulders, the scared Nara took off his Jonin jacket and sandals and walked over to the pile of clothing. After he had put everything on, including the mask that he was surprised to find didn't affect his vision. When the suit was on, the seals all connected and the separate pieces of clothing seemed to meld into one. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Naruto released another seal on the scroll, picked up a smaller scroll and handed it to Shikaku. If they could have seen his face, they would have seen his eyes go wide at what was on the scroll, but they could still hear the gasp that escaped his mouth. Turning to face Naruto, he spoke in barely a whisper. "Do you know what you have done?" The blonde just grinned at him, not saying a word. Worried about his friend, Chuza walked over to him. "What is it, Shikaku?" He didn't get an answer. Shikaku just kept staring at Naruto for a long minute, then walked over to a tree and stood in its shadow, then made a single hand seal. Shadow step jutsu. What happened next was both shocking and amazing. Taking a step back, Shikaku actually melded with the shadow of the tree, only to emerge slowly from the shadow of Chuza. Shikaku rose from the shadow. They could all see black wisps of smoke like tendrils clinging to his body, like he was coming out of the darkest place in the world. Seeing the shocked faces of the people in the clearing made Naruto laugh. "Your faces are priceless. Ha." Taking off the mask, Shikaku took deep breaths. His face was red and his eyes were wide. He looked like he had just run around the village 5 times. "That was incredible. It was like I just stepped through water, and then I was there." Getting serious again, Naruto walked over to Shikaku and handed him a soldier pill, which he took with a nod of his head. "The more you use it, the less chakra it will take. After a while, it shouldn't take any more than your clan's shadow possession jutsu." Stepping forward and clearing his throat, Sarutobi addressed the two. "Would you be so kind as to explain what just happened?" Turning to look at them all, Naruto let a smug look cross his face. The Nara rely on their superior mental condition to think up complex strategies in order to trap their opponents. Because of this, I had a hard time making a weapon that would fit their style. The suit allows them to slip through the space between spaces. All shadows are connected. You just need to be able to open the door. With the Nara bloodline to control shadows, this door was always open to them, but they couldn't survive the trip through the shadows, could you, Nara-san? They all turned to see Shikaku, his face looking better now that the soldier pill was taking effect. "He's right. We have known about the shadow space for years, but until now it was unsafe to travel. The last Nara to try came out frozen to death. The time before that, the pressure was too much and crushed them. Eventually we stopped trying." "But how did you know about it?" "Oh, I broke into your clan vault and read all your scrolls. Don't worry, I didn't take anything, just read enough to understand the mechanics of your jutsu. I couldn't really design a weapon that would be beneficial if I didn't know how everything works. I know that I should be angry, but all things considered, I don't have it in me, it would be too troublesome." Shaking his head, Sarutobi let out a deep breath. "So let me get this straight. With the suit Naruto has made for you, you are now able to travel through shadows." "Pretty much, but only for short distances. The longer the space between shadows, the more strain it would put on the body. Stick with a few feet at a time until you can build up a resistance to the shadows." Shikaku just nodded his head, understanding what Naruto meant. Letting out a deep breath, the aged Hokage turned back to the grinning blonde. I give up. I don't know if you're a genius or just fucking insane. I'm getting too old for this shit. The clan heads nodded in agreement with their Hokage's statement before thanked Naruto for his contribution to the village and walked away. Sume was the most adamant in her thanks and even hugged the blonde again, much to the shock of the other people preset. Naruto was the last to leave the training field, and after everyone was gone he disappeared to go train. Chapter 5. Chunin Exams Part 1. Team 8 was waiting at their usual training ground waiting for Kurenai to show up. They were sitting under a tree relaxing as Shino observed a bug that was crawling on his finger. Naruto was giggling to himself, not that anyone else noticed at this point as they were completely used to it by now. All of a sudden Naruto looked up and looked over to Shino and asked flat out. Shino, how is the colony doing after you placed that last beetle on me? Shino looked over to Naruto and raised a single eyebrow. My colony has gotten stronger thanks to that instance, but why are you bring this up now? Well, I forgot up until now, but now that I remember, would you like me to help them more? How would you like more demonic bugs? Shino raised turned to face Naruto completely. Define demonic. Well, they would be faster, stronger, and will be able to drain a Jonin dry in a matter of minutes. And for those that didn't, they would leave a nasty poison in the enemy's system. While this sounds like a giant benefit, what would be the drawback to granting my colony this demonic transformation? Naruto's smile stretched from ear to ear at that, and he began to break out into fits of laughter. They would be a little more carnivorous than the normal breed of your beetles. In fact, they would need to use less of your chakra the more you let them feed on meat, but they would be able to sustain on your chakra and plants. Shino became silent for a moment before looking at Naruto once again. What do you need to do? I want you to unleash your swarm on me, let them feed, and then I will take care of the rest. Naruto got up and stood in the middle of the training field and motioned for to do it. Shino sighed before raising his hands to unleash his colony. They flew and covered Naruto from head to toe. Hinata looked on with a bit of fear as she didn't want her teammate to get hurt. Naruto didn't make a sound, and after 10 minutes like that Shino called his bugs off. Naruto just stood there and smiled at Shino with his insane grin. That tickled Hinata, and Shino's sweat dropped a little at that before Shino started to communicate with his hive. After a few minutes, Shino turned to Naruto. It seems that your chakra has created a variety of changes and mutations. Some are beneficial, some are off-putting, but you have given me plenty to work with and cultivate. The traits you promised I can definitely get after a week of strategic breeding. Naruto nodded, and Kurenai decided to show up at that moment. In her hand she held 3 slips of what appeared to be paper. Alright guys, come here, I want to test something. Naruto, Shino and Hinata gathered around Kurenai and took a seat where the Jonin and plopped down. She handed each of them a piece of paper and began to explain. Alright, since the Chunin exams are in a month, I think it is a good time to begin working on your elements so you will be able to use them in the Chunin exams. What you have in your hands in a special kind of paper that can tell you what your elemental affinities when you channel your chakra into it. I want you guys to channel your chakra into the paper, and then tomorrow I will bring a jutsu for each of you depending on your affinity. Now if your paper cuts in half, then you have an affinity to wind, lights on fire, you have an affinity to fire, crumples, you have an affinity to lightning, turns to dust, then you have an affinity to earth, and lastly if it gets wet, then you have an affinity to water. Everyone nodded in understanding before Kurani spoke again. Alright, Hinata, why don't you go first? Hinata nodded and started to channel her chakra into her paper, and it immediately became soaked. Kurenai smiled and nodded. It seems you have water, Hinata, that is rather interesting, as most Hyuga have earth or fire as their affinity. Next up is Shino. Go ahead. Shino simply nodded before channeling chakra into his paper. The chakra paper started to turn brown before crumbling to a fine dust. Alright Shino, you have an affinity to earth, which in combination to your bugs can prove to be quite deadly. Kurenai then looked to Naruto and sweat dropped at the sight. Naruto at this point was sitting upside down on his head while solving a Rubik's Cube. Are we boring you, Naruto? Naruto looked at Kurenai with his usual insane grin. Well, yes, I could have told you Hinata's and Shino's affinities mouths ago, but not mine since I can't really read myself. Naruto flipped over to be sitting correctly before holding the piece of chakra paper in front so everyone could see. Naruto started to pour chakra into the paper, so much in fact that the paper began to glow a soft blue. Then something interesting happened. Naruto's paper shredded itself into confetti before a third of each pile turned to show he had an affinity to the water, lightning and fire. Everyone was shocked to say the least, but Kurenai was amazed. No one should have a natural affinity to 4 of the 5 elements unless they have a bloodline limit that allowed that. Kurenai tried to pull herself together a little so the shock wouldn't be so present in her voice. Naruto, why do you have 4 affinities? Naruto took on a puzzling look for a second, which seemed wrong on the young blonde as his grin never left his face, but he had his hand on his chin and he was looking up in an attempt to recall some distant fact. Naruto snapped his fingers. I believe I inherited these affinities from my parents. Uzumaki were well known to have wind and water affinities, with water being the more dominate usually. But the other 2 are a bit of a mystery. Well, it looks as though wind in your primary affinity, so I will have you start with that unless you want to practice on your own, which I would never discourage. But for now I think we should talk about the Chunin exams, as I believe that Team 8 is ready to take them when they are held in Konoha in a month. But I am not going to sugarcoat this. These exams are hard and many people die in these exams. If we are going to train for these exams, I need a commitment now. Team 8 became very quiet after that. Well, at least Shino and Hinata did. Naruto just giggled to himself and continued to smile, laughing at jokes that aren't even there. It was at his point that Shino spoke up. I think as a team we will be more than likely to overcome the exams. We, with Naruto's strength, my tactics and Hinata's medical skills, as a team we won't be defeated easily. Hinata and nodded in agreement before Naruto cut in. Will I be allowed to kill people in these exams? Kurani at this point wasn't really surprised by the question, only disappointed as Naruto still held no value for human life. Yes, Naruto, you will be allowed to kill at some point in the exam. Alright then, I am in, so let's get training. After that the team went through their usual training, and Kurenai had a 3-on-1 spar with Naruto as he needed to be able to handle multiple opponents at once. XXX. The next day, Shino, Hinata and Kurenai arrived at their usual training field to find Naruto in the middle of the clearing drawing an overly complex seal on the ground. Everyone simply walked to the edge of where Naruto was working and looked on as he finished up. Naruto stood up and looked over to his team. I want to test out a new seal, maximize our training if that is alright with all of you guys. Kurenai looked at Naruto and asked. Depends what the seal does. It is a training seal I invented. It will increase the gravity on the body, which over time will increase speed and reflexes. The seal also puts resistance on every muscle in the body, which acts to like weight training, but it will build tone as well as muscle mass. It is a personal seal, so I have to put it on each of you in order for this to work. Kurenai thought for a second before asking a question. How long would it take for you to apply the seal to each of us? Well, for the sealing I will have to apply seals to most of your back, arms and leg, but that will reduce to a seal about the size of my palm, either on your back or shoulder depending on where you want it. Kurenai nodded and took in the information, but it was Shino that spoke up. I'll do it. I have complete trust in Naruto's ability with seals, and if he says this with help then I believe him. Besides, from what Naruto says the seal will do, it sounds as though this will really help with our physical training. Naruto's smile only got bigger as he motioned for Shino to come forward. All right then, I will give the seal to Shino. Kurenai, why don't you give Hinata her jutsu and have her start practicing it? I shouldn't be more than a half hour with the seal. Kurenai really didn't mind that since it allowed her to work with each of her students individually, so she led Hinata away from the seal to the other end of the training field so she could give her the first step of water element training in her first water jutsu. Naruto turned to Shino. Alright. Then Shino, I need you to strip to your underwear as the seal requires me to write a seal matrix over most of your body. I want you to lay down in the center of the seal on the ground. Once I am done I will activate both seals and then we are done. Shino nodded before he began to take off his coat. Naruto turned to a ring of seals that were around the main seal matrix and channeled chakra into. A barrier went up around the Naruto and Shino, blocking them from seeing outside and from people looking or getting in. XXX. Meanwhile, Kurenai had explained the first step of elemental training to Hinata and had her reading the scroll she had gotten that detailed the process. Hinata read the training exercise quickly before she unsealed a large bowl of water from the scroll. The idea of the exercise was simple: place your hand on the water and use chakra to lift the water from the bowl to create a pillar of water. When you get the pillar to be as tall as you, then you have mastered the exercise. Hinata placed her hand on the water and tried to do as the scroll said, and when she lifted her hand she managed to bring the water an inch out of the bowl before she lost her concentration. Kurenai was currently doing an advanced level chakra control exercise, as it didn't take her long to start Hinata on her training and she had to wait on Shino and Naruto. The chakra control exercise was advanced because if done wrong one could seriously hurt themselves. Kurenai was balancing on 10 senbon, one on each finger, while she channeled chakra through them to prevent the senbon from piercing her fingers or digging into the ground. It took a lot of chakra and a lot of control, but for someone who specialized in genjutsu it was almost a requirement to master this exercise and practice control constantly. As promised, the barrier dropped in a half hour and Shino and Naruto stepped out. Shino looked a little fatigued, but other than that he seemed fine. Naruto walked up to Hinata while Shino moved to Kurenai. Naruto walked up to Hinata and smiled. Alright then, it is your turn if you want the seal. Hinata looked from Naruto to Shino. Shino spoke up when Hinata looked his way. I can already feel the seal working. It is hard to move and I feel stiff, but Naruto says that is normal since it will take time to get used to it. Hinata nodded and stood up. Naruto started walking to the seal and Hinata followed closely behind. Once they walked into the seal matrix, Naruto put up the barrier and turned to Hinata. Alright then, I need you to strip to your underwear in order for me to apply the seal. Hinata's face instantly became a bright red and she nodded timidly as she moved to take off her jacket. XXX. Outside the barrier, Kurenai gave Shino a scroll detailing earth manipulation, while Kurenai explained the purpose of elemental training. Not soon after, Shino went off to start the exercise while Kurenai started with her own training again. It didn't take long for Shino to read the first stage of earth manipulation training before he was able to start the exercise. The training appeared to be easy. Take a rock and use earth chakra to change the density of the stone from rock to dirt back to a rock. The point was to do this until he could change the makeup in less than 5 seconds. Shino found that breaking the rock down was easy enough and he was able to do it after the third try, but in order to build it back to a rock was another matter. Once again it took Naruto about a half hour to apply the seal, and it was then that the barrier dropped, revealing a smiling Naruto and a blushing Hinata. Hinata walked back over to where she was practicing her element and started back up again with Naruto walking over to Kurenai. Alright, so what jutsu do you have for me? Kurenai stopped her exercise and looked at Naruto. I had to ask Asuma for this since he is one of the only wind users in the village, but here is the first stage of wind manipulation, an AC ranked wind jutsu called wind release, spiraling blast. Once you have the first stage of the training done you can learn the jutsu. If you master both I will give you something new to work on, alright? Naruto nodded and went off away from the rest of the team and opened up the scroll, looking at it quickly. Once Naruto read it, he plucked a leaf off a tree and began to try and cut it in half with his chakra. Naruto continued to walk into the forest before everyone lost sight of him. XXX. The Chunin exam were getting closer and every day more and more people were coming into the village, teams from every village in the elemental nations gathering to prove themselves the strongest. Rock ninja, cloud ninja, grass ninja, sand ninja, water ninja, even a team from rain had shown up, as well as nobles from around the elemental nations. Team 8 had kept training right up until the day before the exams. Besides the usual physical exercise and technique work, they had all mastered the first stage of their elements. Shino also managed to master Earth Release, Earth Wall, and he also mastered Earth Release, Double Suicide Decapitation Technique. Hinata had mastered her first technique, which was Water Release, Water Prison Technique. But it was Naruto that excelled the fastest, having mastered the training exercise after the first day and then mastering Wind Release, Spiraling Blast the next. After Naruto reported this back to Kurenai, she had Asuma give her as many wind techniques as he could and asked for the next stage of wind manipulation. Kurenai set Naruto on mastering the second stage and gave him wind release. Great breakthrough to learn. The day before the exam, Kurenai deciding to give them a rest so they would be at their best. Ever since they had been shown Naruto's profile in the bingo book, both Hinata and Shino had been training twice as hard as before, and Kurenai was getting worried that they might burn themselves out from the level in which they were training. It wasn't until yesterday that she found out why, having decided to ask them, and it turned out that they were trying to improve themselves so they could keep up with Naruto. Seeing his picture in the bingo book along with all the other ninja had made them worried about being left behind, and, despite the fact that Naruto was insane, he was still their teammate and they didn't want to be a burden. Not that Naruto really noticed. He would talk to them, train with them and still be as random as ever, but it was like he was in his own little world. His chakra control had improved by leaps and bounds over the last month, and he had even showed them some of his ideas for shifts he had had so they would know what to expect. They quickly learned that he had favorites, though they were unsure if it was because he liked them or so his others would not become general knowledge. But today was different from others because for once Naruto, Shino and Hinata had decided to meet outside of training and missions. It was Kurenai's idea. Apparently she thought it would be good for them to spend time outside work to build bonds with each other and help them work better as a team. So far all they had done was walk around the village and talk, mostly about Hinata and Shino's families. It was while they were walking around the village that they found themselves looking at three kids and what seemed to be two sand ninja in the middle of an argument. They had just turned the corner into the street when one of the sand ninja, that seemed to be dressed in some kind of catsuit and makeup with a strange object on his back covered in bandages, lifted one of the kids into the air by the front of his shirt and started to shake him. The kid was wearing some kind of helmet with a tuft of brown hair sticking out the top, a faded green shirt, white shorts and a long blue scarf that was too big for him. "Watch where you're going, brat." The only response he got was the boy kicking him in the shin. "Do you know who I am? I'm the grandson of the Hokage." "I don't care. Apologize." "Fuck you. You little." Bringing back his fist in preparation to punch the boy in the face, Kankuro was surprised when someone grabbed his wrist and stopped it inches from his face. Turning to see who it was, he came face to face with a tall, bandaged blonde kid with a leaf headband tied to his left arm. "You got a problem." "Yeah." Drop the kid. Locking eyes with the blonde, Kankuro suppressed the shiver that ran down his back at the familiar look in his deep, blue eyes. He couldn't put his finger on it. Where had he seen eyes like that before, and why did they scare him so much? Putting the kid down, the kid booked it the second his feet hit the ground, his friends that were watching close behind. Kankuro also noted that for some reason the kid he had been holding had started shaking when he saw the blonde. But Kankuro turned to him and got in his face, ignoring the obvious fear the blonde inspired. "You going to take his place?" Naruto just laughed. "You couldn't hit me. Why don't you run along and go fix your makeup, little girl?" "It's not makeup. It's war paint." "Then why does that girl you're with have the same eyeshadow as you?" They could all see the cat-suited sand ninja's face turning red in anger while the girl tried to stifle a laugh by covering her mouth with her hand. Tamari was stood a few feet behind her brother. She had on a purple battle dress and a pair of black shorts, her hair was tied in 4 separate ponytails and the top of her fan was just visible over her left shoulder. Having enough, Kankuro reached around and pulled the object off his back and slammed it on the ground. Tamari, seeing what he was about to do, ran up to her brother and stood between him and Naruto. "You're going to use Crow. Here, are you mad?" "Shut up. I'm going to wipe that grin off his fucking face." Shaking her head and stepping back, Tamari turned to look at the blonde, only to see he had gone. "If you're going to threaten someone, don't stand around saying it, just do it. It is a lot more effective." Eyes wide, she turned back to her brother and gasped. The blonde boy had gotten behind her and Kankuro without them noticing and had a sinister, black and red katana at her brother's neck. His hair was covering his eyes and the grin on his face had turned from amused to creepy, almost that he would enjoy to cut her brother's head off. Kankuro had frozen the instant he felt the blade at his throat. They stayed like that for a moment, no one moving. Then, without warning, the blade was gone and the blonde was stood in front of them again, looking at a tree to his right. "You missed." Before anyone could ask what he was talking about, the air was flooded with killing intent and a small sandstorm appeared next to Konkuro. Both sand ninja paled at the sight of the red head with the large gourd on his back that appeared form out of the sand. He had very pale skin and dark rings around his eyes, along with the kanji for love tattooed on his forehead in red ink. His eyes were glued to Naruto. Dude, you need to get some sleep. Shrinking away from the boy, Konkuro tried to explain. GG Gaara, it's not what you think. Enough. You are an embarrassment to the village, shut up or I will kill you myself. There was no emotion in his voice when he spoke and his gaze was still locked on Naruto. Mother wants your blood. Without another word, the cork into top of the gourd on his back flew off and sand shot out and moved straight to Naruto, only to stop just before it touched him. Gaara's eyes widened in shock and, taking several steps away, grabbed his head in pain, the sand falling to the ground. The reason for this was because just as the sand was about to reach him, Naruto released his own killing intent, dwarfing Gaara's. Actually, Naruto's killing intent buried Gaara's. This had never happened before, it wasn't possible. No one had ever beaten him in killing intent, not even his father. Still clutching his head in pain from Shukaku screaming at him to run, Gaara looked at Naruto with panicked eyes as he fell to the ground, still clutching his head. What the hell are you? Why does mother scream? Why is mother afraid? Releasing his killing intent, Naruto started slowly walking towards Gaara, who was backing away as quick as possible while still on the ground. Both Konkuro and Temari were shocked at their brother's actions, not having felt Naruto's killing intent because it was directed at Gaara. They had never seen him scared before. Who the hell was this guy? Walking up next to Gaara, who had his back up against a tree, Naruto bent down so he could look into the smaller boy's eyes and grinned. What happened next shocked them all, including Gaara. Wrapping his arms around the boy, Naruto picked him up into a bear hug. Hinata and Shino just brushed it off as Naruto being Naruto, but the sand ninja couldn't understand how he got so close to Gaara and was actually able to touch him. Despite the situation, they couldn't suppress the feeling of jealousy towards the blonde for being able to do something they had never been able to do. Hug their little brother. Putting the shocked redhead down, Naruto placed a hand on the redhead's forehead and pushed his consciousness into Gaara's mind, bringing the redhead with him. A wall of pure chakra went up around the two and everyone stared on in shock. Not more than what appeared to be 10 seconds later did the wall drop and Naruto opened his eyes. Naruto then moved to lift up Gaara's shirt, revealing his seal. They were all so shocked that they just stood there, watching as he examined it and shaking his head before standing back up and leaning in to whisper in Gaara's ear. Whatever he said must have been more shocking than the hug, judging from Gaara's sharp intake of breath and the look on his face. Walking away from the still frozen Gaara, Naruto made his way over to his teammates and started back down the street, but stopped and looked back at them before turning the corner. If you want to help him, meet me on top of the Hokage monument, more specifically the 4th at 8. Don't be late either. XXX. Gaara refused to tell them what the blonde had said to him before leaving, just that he was going to meet him and if they told anyone he would kill them. Despite the fact that they were terrified of him, he was still their brother and they had no intention of letting him go alone. They didn't trust the blonde boy. After their meeting and Gaara going off on his own, they had walked around the village and asked people if they knew who he was. Whenever they gave someone his description, one of two things happened. 1, they would get angry and walked away without saying anything. Or 2, they would get scared, look around as if to make sure no one was around and told them to drop it. If they were honest with themselves, it reminded them of how people acted in Suna whenever Gaara was mentioned, which worried them even more. When it was 7, they left their hotel with Gaara and made their way to the Hokage monument, fully geared and ready for a trap. Baki was suspicious at first, but left them alone when they said they were going to scout the village. They had convinced Gaara to leave early so they could check out the area to be sure it wasn't a trap. The only response they had got was a nod of the head and Gaara moving towards the door. It was about a mile away from the meeting point that they felt it. One moment they were walking and the next it was like an invisible wall was blocking their path. The air shimmered in front of them and no matter how hard they tried it wouldn't let them through. It was then that Tamari looked at the ground and saw the line. Bending down to get a better look, she turned back to her brothers. Look, I think it's some kind of seal. So how are we supposed to meet him if we can't even get there? After a quick debate, they decided to follow the line off the path into the trees and try to find a weak point. They walked through the trees in complete silence for 10 minutes before they came to a break in the line, and it was here they were able to pass through the barrier. It was weird, like walking through water. The air was so thick they couldn't even breathe. As soon as they were on the other side, they heard it. Slow and mournful, it almost brought tears to their eyes just hearing it. Making their way toward the music, they found themselves at the edge of a steep cliff face overlooking the village. It was a beautiful view, the light of the setting sun in the distance reflecting off the rooftops. It was a once-in-a-lifetime view. And there, sat on a rock facing towards the edge of the cliff, was the blonde, playing a black violin. They stayed like that for another 5 minutes while he finished his songs. They knew he knew they were there, and the fact that he didn't care about showing his back to them was bad. It meant one of two things: he didn't care because they weren't a threat in any way to him, or he was an idiot, and from what they saw earlier, it was probably the first. When he was done, Naruto calmly put his violin away and without turning away from the view addressed the sand ninja. It's beautiful, right? When I come up here, it's like it never happened. Like the mask that Konoha works so hard to hide behind is actually the face. But it's not. They are no different than any other village, worse in some ways, better in others, but still the same. Losing his temper at the cryptic statement, Kankuro stepped towards Naruto. What the hell are you talking about? Why did you ask us to come here, and what the hell was the barrier thing that we ran into? Naruto showed no sign that he had even heard the questions, just stared out at the village as the sun finally fell and the sky turned black. It was a simple barrier. Stops anyone from seeing or hearing us. Nothing an experienced ninja couldn't disable with a well-placed jutsu. The way he said this, the lack of interest or emotion in his voice as he said it, made Kankuro want to throw him off the cliff. But before he could take another step, Gaara walked past him and stood just behind to the blonde. What did you mean before, when you said I'm not alone? I have always been alone. Naruto laughed. He laughed so hard it started to hurt. You're wrong. You have your family. That's more than most have. Looking over his shoulder to see the surprised faces of Tamari and Kankuro, Naruto laughed again. It wasn't hard to figure out, the way you look at him with both fear and worry. You're luckier than you know, Red. You have something I never did. Who are you? Standing up and turning to face Tamari, he reached down to his stomach and ripped of the cloth and bandages that covered it, revealing scared skin and a dark spiral mark with another 5, smaller than the one in the middle surrounding it. I am Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the horror of the bloody leaf. They all stood in silence for a long time, the 3 sand ninja frozen like statues, shocked at what they had just been told. Did you think you were the only one? This question seemed to snap them out of their shock. Trying to hide his emotions, but failing, Gaara turned to Naruto, only to see his clothes and bandages were back to how they had been before. Seeing the confusion on his face, Naruto simply said, "We all get something from our tenants. You got your sand, I have my own abilities. Is this what you meant when you called me brother back in the village?" Nodding his head, Naruto walked to the middle of the clearing and unsealed a large brush and pot of ink from a scroll he had hidden in his sleeve and started to draw seals on the ground. We are brothers in pain. We both know what it means to suffer for something out of our control. Both Tamari and Kankuro had been listening to the conversation from the side of the clearing, but when Kankuro heard Naruto saying he was like Gaara, it made his blood boil. How dare you say you know what Gaara's been through? What could you know about his suffering? Whatever he was expecting as a response, it wasn't what he got. Without looking up from the seals he was painting on the ground, Naruto laughed. The only difference between me and your brother is that I didn't have his sand as protection. Before my 7th birthday, all I could do was heal thanks to the Kyuubi and my own healing factor. Their eyes widened in understanding at his words. By Gaara's 7th birthday, he had had more attempts on his life than most Kages did in their rule over the village. Without his sand, Gaara would have been dead a long time ago. But something didn't seem right to Tamari. You say that, yet seem to be fine now. Fine. Babe, you haven't got a clue, have you? The only reason I'm here is because they couldn't keep me locked up anymore. Until a few months ago, I was locked in a mental institution chained in a cell that was covered in chakra absorbing seals that if any normal person were to enter would die in a matter of seconds. I'm completely off my rocker and this village knows it, yet they can't do a damn thing to stop me should I decide to cut loose. Nothing more was said after that. They all just stood there, watching him paint his seal on the ground. All of the sand ninja understood the situation they were in very well. In front of them was a person that on a whim could wipe them from the earth and everyone knew it. The question is why they were here. When he was done, the seal encompassed almost the entire clearing, a maze of lines and curves. And in the center of them all was a small circle without any seals in it. Turning to face the blonde, Gaara looked him in the eyes and asked, "What are you doing?" "Fixing you." Looking back at the three, he pouted. "Why do people always get confused around me? Maybe you're just smarter than everyone else." This made the blonde grin. "Flattery will get you everywhere." Walking over to where the three sand siblings stood, Gaara slightly apart from the other two, Naruto explained. "Your seal is, for lack of a better word, crap. It's too weak to fully hold your biju, too weak to contain its chakra. Whoever made it either thought it would give you more power or didn't know what they were doing, but I'm guessing the first. They were wrong. Having a weaker seal doesn't give you more power, it just makes it nearly impossible for you to control it." "I don't understand. Just by having a biju sealed inside you gives you power, no matter how strong the seal is. I told you I would help you, and I will." Here he pointed towards the circle in the middle of the seal. "Stand in that circle and I can fix your seal. I have been learning about seals ever since I was released and I can make it stronger. You'll keep your sand, but you lose Shukaku's voice in your head." Gaara didn't look convinced, so Naruto used what he knew would be the deal maker. "I can help you sleep." Three sets of eyes widened at those words. He would never admit it, but Gaara longed to be able to sleep. "Why are you doing this?" "Because, despite what you and everyone else may think, it's not too late for you, you can still prove them wrong, prove that you're not the demon." Quote. "What about you?" The only answer he got was a sad grin. Without another word, Gaara made his way towards the circle, only to stop in surprise when both Kankuro and Temari stood in his way. "What are you doing? How do you know we can trust him? For all we know, this could be a trap set up by the Leaf Village." "Kankuro's right, Gaara. Think about what you're doing, we've only known him for a few hours." He didn't know what to say. They were worried about him. After all the times he had threatened to kill them, they were worried about his safety. Turning to Naruto, Gaara let a very rare smile cross his lips. "You were right. I didn't know what I had." Walking past them and straight into the circle, Gaara nodded towards Naruto to start. Bending down and putting both hands on the ground, Naruto channeled his chakra through the array. The seals lit up with an eerie blue light as his chakra flowed through them on their quest to reach the center. What he didn't expect was for both Temari and Kankuro to stand next to him and add their own chakra to the seal. As soon as the light reached the center, it sent up a pillar of blue light high into the sky. They could hear Gaara screaming, but couldn't see him. This continued for several minutes until, slowly, the light faded, leaving an unconscious Gaara lying on the ground. When after a few minutes nothing happened, Kankuro and Temari ran over to their brother to find that he had a small smile on his face and was breathing deeply. "You did it. You did it. He's sleeping." Turning and running towards the blonde, Temari threw herself at him and pulled him into a deep kiss. When she let him go, Naruto practically jumped halfway across the clearing to put some distance between them. "You know what, screw it, I am already screwed when she finds out anyway." Not sure what Naruto was talking about, Temari walked over to her brothers and for the first time since he was born pulled her youngest brother into a hug. They stayed like that for a long minute, until Kankuro and Temari locked eyes and nodded to each other. Standing and walking over to the blonde, Kankuro bowed his head in respect. "We can't thank you enough for what you've done for Gaara, but this might be a start. You're not going to kiss me now as well, are you?" They could all see the tick mark at the back of the puppeteer's head. "No. Good. Because I don't bend that way. I'm not gay. You sure? You look gay. What with the makeup and all? It's called war paint. War paint. Calm down, Konkuro. Taking deep breaths, Konkuro turned a grateful look towards his sister. After he had calmed down, Konkuro explained all about the invasion and how Orochimaru was the leader of Sound Village. He even told Naruto when the invasion was to start and what the signal for the invasion was supposed to be. When he was done, Naruto went about removing the seal and turned to head back to the village, but looked over his shoulder one more time before he left. You sure you're not gay? With that he ran off the edge, laughing at the sound of the Konkuro's screams of fury as he went. XXX. It was the day of the Chunin exams and Hinata and Shino were stood outside the academy waiting for Naruto. They were getting worried, if he didn't show up soon they would be late for the start of the exam. So, how long are we going to stand here? They both stood there for a moment, eyes closed and taking deep breaths to calm themselves down, before turning around to face Naruto, and their eyes went wide. Naruto had changed clothes. Instead of his straight jacket, Naruto was wearing a long, black trench coat that reached down to his feet. The coat had a hood too, which Naruto had down at the moment. The coat had crimson fire around the bottom edge. The coat also seemed to be covered in seals all stitched in silver, giving the coat a mysterious look. When Naruto turned around to look at the academy, they saw on the back of the coat the same smiley face he had painted on the village hall in Wave Country. It was printed in a silver ink and had been made to look like it was dripping. It was the first time they had ever seen him in different clothes. They had actually thought he didn't even have other clothes. But it confused them a little since they didn't see Naruto's katana on him anywhere. The looks on their faces made Naruto laugh, and without saying anything he turned and went in. Getting over their shock, Hinata and Shino quickly followed. How long have you been here, Naruto? Turning so he was walking backwards, the blonde got a thoughtful look before looking at Shino. About 2 hours. And you didn't think to tell us you were there? Nope. Why not? I was thinking. Should I even ask what you were thinking about? I was wondering what the inside of my nose looks like. I tried to look but just couldn't see up there. Hey, could you do me a favor? Quote. Hell no. Naruto pouted but said nothing in response. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't even notice the crowd of ninjas stood outside a door on the second floor and went straight to the third. When they got to room 301, Naruto paused at the door. Is there really this many rooms in this place? Seems kind of small to have over 300 rooms. Shrugging their shoulders, they walked into the room. It was filled with ninja from different villages, all armed to the teeth. The air was thick with killing intent and everyone was giving suspicious looks to the others in the room, even people from the same village. Naruto could see Gaara, Temari and Konkuro stood next to a wall away from everyone else out of the corner of his eye and gave them a small nod. Gaara looked pretty good. He still had the rings around his eyes, but they were a shade lighter from what they had been the last time he saw him, and instead of standing away from his brother and sister, he was stood right next to them, a small, almost unseen smile on his face. He had a long way to go, but it was a start. Seeing the other rookies in a corner at the far end of the room, Team 8 headed straight in their direction. They got there just in time to see a silver-haired genin with glasses sat on the floor read out information on a card to a rather beat-up Sasuke. Let's see. Rock Lee, taijutsu expert for Team 9. His sensei is Might Guy, and due to a medical condition he is unable to use even the simplest jutsu. His team have performed 52D rank and 5C rank. If he can't use jutsu, how did he pass the genin exam? From what I understand, he became the apprentice of Might Guy. Pickle. Everyone in the room jumped at the sudden noise and Kabuto threw his deck of info cards in the air. What the hell? Almost as one, the eyes of all the people in the room turned to the tall blonde rolling around on the floor laughing, and the two stood on either side of him shaking their heads and trying to look like they didn't know him. Your faces. Your faces. When he felt the killing intent in the room spike, Naruto stopped laughing and raised an eyebrow at them all from his position on the ground. That all you got? Really? I mean, that is just pathetic. I can't believe you call yourselves ninja. Before anyone could say anything in response, the room was flooded with enough killing intent to bring everyone not used to Naruto's killer intent to their knees. Pussies. After a minute, Naruto stopped and turned back to the other rookies and the silver-haired genin. Hey, why did you yell pickle? In case you haven't noticed, you could cut the tension in this room with a knife. Turning to the glasses-wearing teen, Naruto grinned. Why not? I remember you. You're that weird kid from the last day at the academy, Naruto, right? Looking at his fellow blonde, Naruto nodded his head. Yep, and you're the Yamanaka girl that looks like she needs a meal. Seriously, eat a cow or something. You look like you might fall over. They could all see the blush on Ino's face. Shut up. You're one to talk. You're skinnier than I am. That's because I have a freakishly high metabolism and until a few months ago couldn't get the necessary calories I needed. You just starve yourself. What the hell are you talking about? Deciding to intervene before Ino started screaming, Shikamaru stepped in. Troublesome. He means his body was starving because he couldn't eat enough food. Now can you shut up? You're giving me a headache. Shut up, Shika. Excuse me, but who are you? Turning back to the silver-haired genin with the info cards, Naruto got a confused look on his face. You're still here. They could all see the sweat mark form at the back of Kabuto's head. Yeah. Walking to stand next to him, Hinata placed a sympathetic hand on his shoulder. That's Uzumaki, Naruto. Just try and ignore him and you should be fine. They all watched in surprise when the room went completely silent as, yet again, all the eyes of the room turned to look at them, only this time with slight fear. Turning back to Kabuto, they were even more surprised to see that he had gone pale and was staring at Naruto with wide eyes. You Uzumaki and Naruto. As in, the horror of the bloody leaf, that Uzumaki Naruto. So you've heard of me. At the confused looks of both teams 7 and 10, Kabuto reached into his pocket and took out a copy of the bingo book. He's one of the youngest ninja to ever be added to the bingo book and one of the only people to have a "do not engage" in his profile. Shrugging his shoulders at the looks he was getting, Naruto brushed it aside. It's not that big a deal. It says here you killed almost 1,000 men with a single jutsu and put their heads on pikes around the village of Wave. Well, yeah, they pissed me off. All the genin in the room stepped away from the insane blonde. Except 3 girls wearing kiri headbands who stepped forward with their own copies of the bingo book in their hands. The one on the right had purple hair that framed her face and trailed down to the middle of her back, her soft blue eyes shining and a light blush going across her otherwise expressionless face and her skin so pale it seemed to almost glow, and a lollipop in her mouth. She wore a black tank top under a sleeveless white jumper and purple sleeves that covered her arms and a green checkered skirt and stripy purple knee socks. The girl on the left had long pink hair and a very cute smile. Her large blue eyes had a clear innocence about them that seemed to make her all the more beautiful, and she kept sneaking glances at the blonde as they made their way forward. She had on a tight-fitting blue tank top with a white leather jacket and a white skirt that didn't reach her knees. The one in the middle seemed to be the leader and was very beautiful, just like the other 2. With her long white hair, blood-red eyes and a body that most women would kill for. She had on the same clothes as the pink-haired girl, except her top was red and her jacket and skirt were black. She walked with confidence and had a smirk on her face as she made her way over to the Konoha genin and stopped in front of Naruto. So you're the horror of the bloody leaf. I like your picture, but you look cuter in person. Mind signing our books? Naruto was just as surprised as the other genin at this point, but took the books and drew his signature smiley face on the picture of him covered in blood. Taking the books back, the girl with the red eyes smirked at him. You've got quite the reputation, slaughtering almost 1,000 men, mutilating their corpses. Yup, that was a fun afternoon. You're not like most ninja, are you? You've got no idea. The smirk on her face grew bigger. I'm Akasha. This is my sister Mocha and our friend Mizor. Maybe after the first part of the exam is over we can go out and compare mission notes. The look on Naruto's face showed clearly that he didn't understand what she really meant. Sure, sounds fun, I'll be sure not to kill you before then. They just smiled and walked off, Akasha looking back at him over her shoulder as they went and winking. It's a date. Turning back to the 9 shocked faces of his fellow genin, Naruto raised his eyebrow in confusion. What? Kiba was the first to get over his shock, but could only say one thing. Dude, I've got to get in that book. This was followed by the silent nods of Sasuke, Choji, Shikamaru, Shino and Kabuto. All right you little shits, shut up and listen. Turning to see the source of the shouting, the group of Konoha genin, along with everyone else in the room saw a group of men and women stood together at the door wearing chunin jackets. At the front of the group was a large, broad-shouldered man in a long black trench coat and his Konoha headband worn as a bandana over his head. He had 2 scars on his face, one running from the top left side of his head to his chin and a smaller one across his right cheek. His eyes were hard and he had a small smirk on his face that sent shivers down the spines of more than a few genin. Right, now that I've got you ladies' attention, take a seat. You will be quiet, and if anyone asks a question I will take great pleasure in throwing you out that window. At his words they all hurried to sit in one of the chairs that were set around the room. All except Naruto, who just walked to one at the back of the room and sat on the desk. He didn't realize until after he sat down that he was next to the girl with the white hair, Akasha, who just sat there and smirked at him out of the corner of her eye. He also didn't notice that Ibiki had walked over and stood over him, waiting for the blonde to realize he was there. When Naruto realized that there was a shadow over him he turned to the imposing form of Ibiki and grinned. Hey, you know, you've got a lot of nose hair. Are you insane? I'm not insane, everyone else is just boring. Quote. Just sit in the chair. Okay. Rolling back off the table and into the chair Naruto found himself upside down. What the hell is wrong with you? I don't know, but apparently there's a betting pool going round, you should make a bet maybe you can win something nice. I really want to hurt you. You know, a lot of people say that, wonder why. Quote. It's a mystery. Turning away from the odd boy and walking to the front of the room, Ibiki couldn't help but wonder where he had seen him before. Right, now that that's sorted let's get on with it. Being handed out to you now is an exam paper with 9 questions. You will have 45 minutes to answer them and at the end of that time I will give you all a 10th. Unlike most tests, where you get points for each correct answer, in this test you start out with 10 points and lose 1 for each wrong answer. Also, this test is graded as a team, meaning that if one of your teammates fails, you all do. The people around me are going to be watching you for any sign of cheating. If you are caught cheating you lose 2 points, get caught 5 times and you're gone. No arguing, no exceptions. As he was saying this several of the examiners handed out exam papers to the seated genin. When that was done they positioned themselves around the room, Ibiki still at the front. Well, what are you waiting for? Start. The room was filled with the sound of the papers being turned over. Over the next 43 minutes 10 different teams were sent out for being caught cheating, some tried to put up a fight but were quickly dealt with by the chunin around the room. Throughout the entire time Ibiki didn't take his eyes off the blonde at the back of the room, who hadn't written a single thing the entire time, he hadn't even picked up his pencil. It wasn't until time was about to run out that he finally did something. Standing up from his seat Naruto walked over to a rock genin in the chair in front of him, grabbed the hair on the back of his head and slammed it into his table. Without pause the blonde then reached around the unconscious boy and took his test, sat back down in his chair, just as time ran out, oblivious to the shocked faces of those in the room. Raising an eyebrow at the boy Ibiki walked over and, just like at the start of the exam stood over him. What the hell was that? What? Give me one reason not to throw you out right now. I only cheated once. You said 2 points off for each time we get caught cheating, so you can't do a thing. Eyes locked, the two seemed to be in some kind of silent battle of the minds. They stayed like that for the next few minutes, neither breaking eye contact. Until the older man let out a breath and went back to the front of the room and nodded to one of the chunin. Walking up to the rock genin and his teammates they were quickly escorted from the room, much to the protests of his teammates. Let's just get this over with. I need a drink, a very large drink. As the papers were being collected in Ibiki explained about the 10th question. Right, before I give you the 10th question there are some new rules. First, if you get it wrong, you fail and can never participate in the chunin exams again. So I'm giving you one last chance to quit, but if one quits your whole team quits. The room was filled with shocked silence. You can't do that. People have taken this exam multiple times. The grin that spread across Ibiki's face was almost enough to make Naruto jump up and shake his hand. They didn't have me as an examiner. Another 5 teams left in the first few minutes following his words. Making his way over to the blonde boy, Ibiki tried to intimidate him into leaving. You sure you want to continue? If you get it wrong, you and your team will be genin for the rest of your life as ninja. You couldn't even answer the first 9, what chance do you have at the 10th? This time it was Naruto that sent a shiver down Ibiki's spine. Who said I couldn't answer them? It was just more fun to knock him out and take his. What the hell is wrong with you? I think I was dropped on the head as a baby, or it might be that paint thinner I drank when I was 4. What do you think? Quote. Fuck it. You all pass. I can't take it anymore, and it's like talking to Anko when she's pissed. What about the 10th question? There isn't one. The question was whether or not to take the question. Before he could say anything else, a cloth ball came smashing through the window and exploded into a banner that read, "The sexy and insane Uzumaki Naruto." Many of the boys in the room were thrown back from nosebleeds at the sight of Anko, except for Naruto. Falling off his seat from laughter, Naruto, between deep breaths, looked at the woman stood proudly in front of the banner. Ha ha ha. You forgot to change it back, ha ha ha. They could all see the tick mark form on Anko's forehead. Storming over to the blonde, who was still rolling around on the floor, Anko loomed over him much like Ibiki had. Realizing she was there, Naruto froze. Hey Anko-chan. Hey Squirt. So what's this I hear about you and Sum? Please don't cut my nuts off again. They kissed me. They. Shit. Raising her eyebrow at the exchange, Akasha stood and walked over to them. Are you his girlfriend or something? Turning to face the water ninja, Anko laughed. Girlfriend? Hell no. The kid is fun and strong, but he isn't mine. Then why do you care who he kisses? Because he's the first guy the first met that's not a pervert, so I'm making sure he stays that way, isn't that right, brat? If I kiss a girl, she'll cut my nuts off. If I say something perverted, she'll cut my nuts off, and if I look at a girl in a perverted way, she'll feed me to a snake. Fair enough. Ibiki chose that moment to intervene. As interesting as that is, you need to get on with the exam. Oh, right. Hey, wait a minute, why are there so many left? Ibiki, you're losing your touch. Just take the brats. I need a drink. Chapter 6. Chunin Exams Part 2. After everything had calmed down, and the boys that had fainted from blood loss had regained consciousness, Anko had led the genin from the exam room to a large fenced-off training ground. It had a forest made up of giant trees, bigger than the ones that surrounded the village itself, and was surrounded by a 20-foot-tall fence, with barbed wire running across the top and several signs saying, Training Ground 44, do not enter. Every 50 feet or so were large steel gates numbered from 1 and they assumed straight up to 44. As they got closer to the fence, strange noises could be heard from the other side from deep in the forest, but because of the trees and the shadows in between them, they couldn't make out what made the sounds. Something about the forest seemed wrong, almost evil. The way the shadows seemed to ripple and the sheer size and shape of some of the trees just put them all on edge. Well, most of them. Home sweet home. They all looked to see Naruto walking up with his teammates, the huge grin on his face taking on an affectionate sheen as he gazed into the forest. Turning to her teammate, Hinata got a worried look. This is the fenced-off forest you told us about. It looks dangerous. That's because it is. Jumping at the sudden appearance of Anko, they all listened to what she was saying. What you see before you is the one and only Training Ground 44, otherwise known as the Forest of Death. Inside is a host of strange animals that have, for unknown reasons, mutated into some of the most dangerous creatures you will ever face. Now sign these death waivers and we can get on with the second part of your test. Death waivers. Yep. It's just to say that I and the village of Konoha are not responsible for anything that may, and probably will, happen to you while you are in the forest, and that you are participating under your own free will. After the forms had been handed out and signed, Anko had them all crowd around a tent that had been set up near the gate numbered 1. Right, now that all the legal crap is out of the way, let's get down to business. As she was talking, the purple-haired kunoichi pulled out two scrolls, one brown and one white, both with a different kanji on them. These are the Heaven and Earth scrolls. Get a good look, each of your teams will be given one scroll. The idea of this test is for you to acquire one Earth scroll and one Heaven scroll within the 5-day time limit and get to the tower at the center of the forest. You will be taken to a different gate each and let in at the same time. Anything goes. Killing, maiming, anything. When you get to the tower, you will need all your team to be alive and in fighting condition or you will be disqualified. Oh, one last thing. Don't open the scrolls until you're in the tower. Now line up and get your scroll. Quickly doing as they were told, the genin all line up outside the tent and were directed to their gates to wait for the signal to start. Team 8 decided to give their scroll to Shino for safekeeping and made a quick plan of action. They decided to follow Naruto to a place he said they would be safe until they could plan further. When the signal was given, they shot off into the training ground without a second's hesitation and disappeared into the shadows of the trees, Naruto in the lead. XXX. Team 8 had settled into a cave that Naruto knew about, hidden under the roots of one of the large trees that made up the forest. The entrance was small, being only wide enough for them to enter single file. There was no light and it was soon obvious to Hinata and Shino that they were in a tunnel leading down at a sharp angle. Eventually they came out of the tunnel and into a large cavern about 100 feet in every direction, with a strange luminescent mold covering the walls and ceiling in patches of green light. They could also tell that Naruto had been there before on the count of the weapons that had been hung on the wall at the far side of the cavern from where they had entered. There was more than they could count. Swords of different sizes and shapes, axes, hammers, staffs, some things they couldn't identify and others that looked like they were only half finished. There were 3 desks sat against another wall to their right and a small waterfall on the left that fed a small underground stream running through the cavern. They also noticed that the ground was covered in a large, intricate seal that neither of them had seen before. After Naruto had explained the seals he had used on the weapons he made for them, they had both decided to learn the basics of seals. It shocked them just how complex the craft was. One mistake, one line out of place and a seal could have unknown consequences. It could be as simple as it not working and go as far as blowing up in the sealer's face. It had given them a new level of respect towards their blonde teammate. To be able to learn so much in such a short time was truly amazing. They could only understand the basics, but what they did was enough to know it was impressive, whatever it did. Welcome to my home. I'd tell you to wipe your feet, but the floor is made of mud. So this is where you live. I'm surprised you found somewhere like this in such a place. Grinning at Shino for the compliment, Naruto led them to a corner of the room where he had made several wooden chairs and sat down. So, how you want to do this? Taking the seats next to the blonde Hinata and Shino thought about the best way to go about the exam. The fact that they now had a base of operation made things easier, while other teams would be still looking for somewhere to set up, and they probably wouldn't find a place as secure as this. They could start to plan and get a step ahead. Leaning forward so he would be heard, Shino tried to sum up what the situation was. The problem we have is that both Hinata and I are not straight up fighters, we are scouts. Although we can fight, it is not our best area. Nodding his head and taking on his serious attitude, Naruto agreed. That's what I was worried about. You're both strong, but we don't know what the other teams are like, or what the next stage of the exam will be, which is why I think it would be best for you to stay here while I go and find us a scroll. We can't let you do that. It wouldn't be fair for us to let you do all the work. Shino's right. We need to work as a team. Just think about this for a second. I know this forest like the back of my hand and can move easier on my own. 1 is harder to see than 3. I know that you're both worried about being a burden to me, but you're not, and I have more chakra and stamina than you both, so it wouldn't affect me as much as you. If I spend 3 of the 5 days in the forest gathering scrolls, 1 can spend the last day and a half resting here and we can move to the tower together. They both thought about it for several minutes. They didn't like it, but it did make the most sense. Finally, looking back up to the blonde, Shino made eye contact and nodded. Very well, but if you're not back in 3 days, we will come look for you. Spoil sport. You can get food from the seals on the desk. Without another word, Naruto left through the tunnel and was gone. Turning to face Shino, Hinata couldn't help but wonder. We just let the beast out of the cage, didn't we? I fear so. I doubt he will stop at one Earth scroll. What had they unleashed on the other contestants? XXX. Naruto loved being in the forest, his forest. Here he was king, the top predator. Nothing could touch him here. He knew every tree, rock and animal that lived here. His feet barely touched the ground as he jumped from tree to tree, all his senses set to try and pick up something that didn't belong. It didn't take him long to come across two teams of rock ninja that had teamed up for this part of the exam, and couldn't help the grin that stretched across his face. They thought they would be safer in a group that was the mindset of prey. Make yourself look big, act confident and huddle together and hope you're not the one to be picked off. It made his blood sing in anticipation. He wanted to hunt, the thrill of the chase, to feel their flesh tear under his claws and their blood flowing through his fingers, their screams of terror when they realized that they would die. He was going to enjoy this, he was going to enjoy the blood. Walking forward out of the foliage, he didn't even try to sneak up on them. Naruto made his way towards the group. It wasn't until he was a few meters away that they noticed he was even there, huge grins spreading on their faces when they recognized him from the first exam. Stepping forward, one of the boys looked him straight in the eye. You got guts, I'll give you that. But do you really think we'll let you live after what you did back in the first stage? Naruto just laughed at him. What makes you think I'll let you live? There are 6 of us and one of. The reason he trailed off mid-sentence was because 5 Naruto clones had emerged out of the forest, all with the same grin on their faces. Hark hark, the dogs do bark. The beggars are coming to town. Some in rags and some in jags. And one in a velvet gown. Their voices melding together into one as they sang, and as they sang their bodies started to ripple and change. When they had finished, the 6 rock ninja lost their grins and huddled together in fear. Where the Naruto and his clones had once stood were now 6 identical things. Their skin was black, so much so they would blend in with the shadows of the trees around them. Their bodies had become insect-like, with 4 long skinny arms and 2 legs. They had long whip-like tails and long bony fingers topped with razor-like claws. But the most terrifying thing about them was their heads. The shape was the same except for the elongated muzzle-like jaws filled with 2 rows of fangs, and where their eyes should have been was smooth black skin. Before the rock ninja could prepare a defense, the creatures had them surrounded and were moving in, hissing in anticipation of the kill. They didn't even have time to pull a kunai before the head rolled, literally. One of the rock ninja dropped to the ground, head rolling away and blood flowing from the neck. The rest followed close behind, their comrades screaming in terror and pain. Throughout the forest, the other genin teams stopped and shivered in fear as the air was filled with terrified screams that echoed off the trees for all to hear. Several teams followed the screams to their source, but by the time they got there, all they found was a clearing covered in blood and a severed head with an expression of absolute terror frozen on its face. XXX. For the next 3 days, teams would come across the same carnage just as they had the first day, clearings covered in blood and body parts. Many had convinced themselves that it was the animals they had been warned about, but not all were so sure. Many teams also found it increasingly hard to find teams with scrolls. XXX. Naruto was on his way back to his team. It had been a good hunt. Currently in the seal in his kunai pouch were 13 heaven scrolls and 15 earth scrolls. He was also carrying a stick decorated with the blood-stained headbands of the teams he had killed. Rock, grass, and cloud headbands were tied to the stick to show off his kills. It was on his way back to his cave that he came across an odd sight. Teams 7 and 10, along with a strangely dressed boy with a bowl-cut hair style unconscious on the ground, and a team from, if he remembered correctly, Sound. What was strange though was that Sasuke had odd marks spreading across his skin that looked like black flames and was currently trying to pull the arms off one of the Sound ninja. Walking out of the tree line and into the clearing so they could all see him, Naruto pouted. What the hell? I'm supposed to be the only psychopath in this forest. Taking the opportunity to run, Dosu and Kin leapt forward, grabbed Zaku and ran into the forest. Sasuke didn't even seem to notice the Sound ninja had left. His red eyes were focused on the blonde and nothing else. Fight me. Raising his eyebrows in surprise, Naruto took a good look at Sasuke's eyes. Why the hell are you high in the middle of the forest of death? Seriously, that's my thing. Losing his patience and charging at the insane blonde, Sasuke let out a scream of rage and tried to tackle Naruto to the ground. Sakura, worried Naruto might get hurt by the new stronger Sasuke, tried to warn him, but before she could say anything, Naruto had slapped a seal on his face and punched him in the gut. As he fell to the ground, the strange flame-like marks receded until all that was left was 3 black tones on his left shoulder. Without looking at the shocked faces from the others in the clearing, Naruto bent down and examined the mark with a critical eye. Naruto picked up Sasuke and slung him over his shoulder and turned to the others. Follow me. Don't worry about the green guy, his team is in the tree above us, hey Ten-chan. Jumping down from the tree they were in, Neji and Tenten bent down and picked up Lee between them. Before they left, Tenten gave a nod in the blonde's direction and disappeared. Without another word, Naruto turned and started jumping through the trees, the rest of Team 7 and 10 close on his heels. XXX. Hinata and Shino were both unsure what to think when Naruto came back with an unconscious Sasuke on his shoulder and Team 7 and 10 right behind him. Raising his eyebrow in curiosity, Shino stood up from his chair and walked over to the group. Do I want to know why Uchiha-san is unconscious, or why you brought the others with you? I didn't do it. Well, I might have knocked him out, but he started it. Walking up to the other teams, Hinata sighed and led them to the chairs. As they went, Naruto lay Sasuke down on the floor and started to draw a seal around him, Shino watching him as he went about it. Ino, Sakura, Kiba, Shikamaru and Choji were all looking around the cavern with interest, especially when they saw the weapons on the wall. Walking up to them, Ino was about to take one of the swords off the wall when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Turning around, she was confused to see Naruto stood behind her. Don't touch the boss's stuff. Boss, I'm a clone. Oh. Walking up to the two blondes, Shikamaru looked at the wall. How did you find this place, and all these weapons? Boss lives here and made those. Most are prototypes, but some are finished. Walking up to the wall, Choji was surprised to see a long chain with a head-sized steel ball at the end. This is my clan's new weapon made by the faceless blacksmith. Why do you have one? The clone just looked at Choji for a moment, waiting for the light bulb to turn on. A few minutes later, they all saw his eyes go wide in understanding. Oh, troublesome. So you're the faceless blacksmith. I guess we should be thanking you. Dude, I'm a clone. Hit me in the face and I explode. As if to prove his point, the clone ran into the wall and burst into smoke, leaving Team 10 with sweat drops on the back of their heads. XXX. An hour later, Naruto had finished his seal and was ready to activate it. The black ink glowed blue and the seal on the young Uchiha's neck glowed purple in response. At some point, Sasuke had started screaming and both Sakura and Ino were stood at the edge of the seal with worried looks on their faces. As soon as he was done, they ran to the still sleeping Sasuke and checked his neck. It's still there. I thought you were going to get rid of it. Are you mad? I wouldn't mess with a seal I don't know anything about. If I tried to remove it without understanding it fully, I might trigger a kill switch. Both girls gasped at that and pulled the Uchiha into a tighter hug, unwittingly strangling him. If you don't let him go, I don't need to worry about a kill switch. He'll be dead. As the two quickly backed away, Shikamaru walked up to Naruto with his hand in his pockets and looked at the seal on the ground. If you weren't removing it, what were you doing? Diagnostics. I was examining the seal while it was still fresh. But I think I should talk to the Hokage before I tell you anything. Troublesome. It's really that bad. Naruto didn't even bother to answer. Walking over to the weapons on the wall, Naruto moved to an empty spot and placed the stick with the headbands he had collected on the wall. It was the first time any of them had taken notice of the stick, and it sent shivers down their backs when they realized what they meant. Coming up behind him, Shino looked over the headbands with a critical eye. I take it you got more than one. With a grin on his face, Naruto unsealed the scrolls he had collected and dropped them on the floor at Shino's feet. He then bent down and threw one of each to Kiba and Shikamaru. You can rest here if you want, but it's probably better if we get duck ass here to the tower for medical treatment. Nodding their heads, they all left and headed towards the tower. XXX. It took them 3 hours to get to the tower. Naruto had been serious the whole way, and the others were starting to get worried about just what he had found out about the seal. He had never been serious for this long before. When they got there, they all entered the same room, and before any of them had time to read what it said on the wall, Naruto threw one of each scroll onto the floor in front of them and stood back as they exploded in a cloud of smoke to reveal Kakashi. Looking over the 3 teams, he was surprised to see the unconscious Uchiha slung like a bag of potatoes over Naruto's shoulder. Seeing the look on the blonde's face, the one-eyed Jonin moved toward them and looked over Sasuke. "I need to speak with the Hokage, now. The snake was in my forest." XXX. Naruto was stood in a small office that had been set up in the tower for the Hokage during the Chunin exam. It didn't have any windows, and the wallpaper, which might have been white at some point in the past, was peeling off the walls. The carpet was covered in a thick layer of dust, and whenever he moved it caused a small cloud to rise into the air. In front of him, sat at an old wooden desk, piled high with Hokage's greatest enemy, paperwork, was the old man himself. He had a serious look on his face that was matched by the young blonde stood in front of him. "So he's here already. He wasn't supposed to show up until the finals." Nodding his head in agreement, Naruto walked over and leaned on the desk. "Exactly. Something's not right. From what Temari and Kankuro told me, the plan was for him to kill you at the final in the chaos from the invasion. For him to risk showing himself early means he has a second motive, and Sasuke is at the center of it." They stayed in silence for the next few minutes, thinking about what it all meant, when the door to the room opened and in walked Kakashi. "I am to guess by the seal on Sasuke the Orochimaru was in the forest." Turning to see the copycat ninja as he walked in, Naruto waited for Kakashi to close the door before he answered. "That fucking snake was in my forest, my goddamn forest." "Okay, but what did Orochimaru want?" Over the next hour, the 4 of them tried to think of what reason Orochimaru had for showing himself too early. Then came Naruto's explanation of the seal he had put on Sasuke. "From what I can tell, it's the completed version of the cursed seal that Anko-chan has. It's trying to convert his chakra, though I don't know what into. It seems to be thicker and more potent. His body doesn't like it and is trying to fight, like a disease. I also found a kill switch. We would have 3 attempts to remove it before it turned his chakra into pure poison and killed him. This is basically the same thing hers does. But unlike hers, it also has a compulsion seal mixed into it." At the blank looks on their faces, the blonde let out a breath. "It means that he will eventually go looking for Orochimaru. It will start like an itch at the back of his mind and will grow and grow until he can't stop himself. If we don't remove it, and soon, he will go to him." This worried Sarutobi. He knew why his ex-student would want the boy and what it meant if he wanted him now, but kept his mouth shut. "The last thing I picked up is that the seal is only half finished. There's a second seal that goes over the top of the one he has to complete it." After his explanation, Sarutobi thought through his options. If he let this go on, someone would get hurt, but if he waited, it might be their chance to take out the snake Sanin once and for all. We wait. It's obvious that he has his own agenda that we don't know about, but he still doesn't know we're onto him. We have the element of surprise, and that's all we need. Kakashi, go and seal the cursed mark on Sasuke. He will be allowed to continue the exam, but keep an eye on him. Naruto, I need you, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, to be yourself. But I also want you to look into the cursed seal. When the second stage is over, there is someone I would like you to meet. He is an accomplished seal master and will be helping you with your research." When he heard the old man's words, Naruto grinned like he always did. Hee, I think I can do that. Alright, now get out. I need to finish my paperwork. XXX. For the last 2 days of the second part of the Chunin exam, Naruto could be found in one of 3 places. In his room with the door locked, in the mess hall eating, or with Gaara talking. Ever since his seal had been fixed, the red-haired sand ninja had become a lot more pleasant to be around, especially since he stopped crushing people with his sand. The fact that he could now sleep and the voice of his mother was gone had improved his mood greatly. When he was told about the whole mother thing, Naruto had spent an hour rolling around on the floor laughing at the fact that the great Shukaku was gender confused. It was also the first time Tamari and Konkuro had heard their brother laughing at something that didn't involve killing. During this time several other teams had arrived at the tower. The team from Rain, in their matching yellow jumpsuits and breather masks, they were a bit roughed up, but it was nothing an hour or two of rest wouldn't fix. Not long after that the girls from Water had arrived. You wouldn't be able to tell they had just come out of the forest, their cloths were spotless and there wasn't a mark on their bodies. After them came Tenten and her team, shortly followed by the silver-haired boy that they had met just before the exam started, Kabuto and his team. The last to make it to the tower, arriving just before the time limit ran out, was the three-sound ninja. The one that had his arms broken was rushed to the med ward, and when he came out both his arms had been bandaged and put in slings. When the time ran out for other genin to get to the tower, all the finalists were gathered together in a large room with an old statue of a pair of hands in a hand seal, a balcony running around the room looking down at a wide flat floor. Sat in a high-backed chair on the balcony above the statue was the Hokage, and next to him was Anko, Kakashi, Asuma, Kurenai, Baki, a man wearing a cloth over his face and long coat to cover his whole body with a headband with a musical note on it, another man wearing the same clothes as the Rain Genin, and a very attractive woman in a blue battle dress and her red hair tied in a high ponytail. A kiri headband was around her waist like a belt, showing her to be a water Jonin. As all the genin moved so that they were in a line in front of the Hokage and the Jonin senseis, Sarutobi stood and walked to the edge of the balcony to look down on the 24 finalists. For the next few minutes they all listened as he explained about how the genin exam was a replacement for war and that they should all be proud to represent their villages, and ended with an explanation of why they needed a preliminary to bring down the numbers. But just as he was about to explain the rules he was interrupted by a leaf Jonin. The man looked like he was about to keel over. He had dark bags under his eyes and his skin was so pale it was almost pure white. He wore the normal Jonin attire for a Jonin of Konoha, with his headband tied to his head like a bandana. As he spoke every few words were interrupted by coughing and he would be forced to stop to catch his breath. Thank you, Hokage-sama, but it's my job from here. After receiving a nod from the aged man as he sat back in his seat, the ill Jonin turned back to the genin. My name is Gecko Hayate and I will be the referee for the prelims. The rules are that you can use anything you want to subdue your opponent, but if I end the match you must stop. You will be disqualified if you don't stop, or if someone interferes with the match. Your names will be randomly selected by this machine. As he said the last part, the hands of the statue slowly started to part to reveal a large screen TV with pictures of them all with their names next to them. This is your last chance to quit. If you do, your teammates will not be disqualified, but you will need to leave the tower. For a moment no one said anything until, hesitantly, Kabuto raised his hand. Nodding his head at the silver-haired boy, Gecko motioned towards the doors and Kabuto left. They waited for a few more minutes but nobody else raised their hand, so the ill-looking Jonin turned to the screen. The names and faces were replaced with a blank screen, but that disappeared to show two faces. Sasuke Uchiha vs Akato Yoroi. Will those whose names did not show up on the board please move to the balcony? Sasuke Uchiha and Akato Yoroi, please move to the center of the arena and prepare to fight when I give you the signal. When they were all in place and everything was ready, Gecko moved in between the two teams and raised his hand. As he did this, Yoroi slid into a fighting stance and Sasuke drew his twin katana from his back and got into a low crouch. Ready. Begin. As soon as Gecko's hand came down and he had jumped to the side of the arena, the two boys charged each other, Sasuke in a spin and Yoroi in a straight dash with his hands out. By the time they met in the middle, Sasuke had worked up enough speed to generate the momentum he needed. Every time Yoroi came at him with his bare hand, one of the young Uchiha's blades would be ready to meet it, forcing him to pull it back. Not that it was one-sided. No matter how hard he tried, Sasuke couldn't get out of defense. Yoroi moved too fast, and whenever he tried to shift into attack, the older boy would try and grab his arm to stop his rotations. But the biggest problem was that he was reluctant to activate his Sharingan after Kakashi had warned him about the dangers of the seal on his shoulder. The one-eyed Jonin had sealed it, but he said that there was still a risk. This meant that the amount of time he could continually use the drunken spinner was drastically reduced. They were at it for 10 minutes straight, dodging and weaving around each other, trying to get the advantage to push things in their favor. When they reached 10 minutes, Sasuke couldn't keep up his spin and jumped back to put some distance between them. The problem with this was because he was dizzy, he couldn't defend himself from Yoroi when the masked genin grabbed him by the throat. It didn't take Sasuke long to realize what was happening when he felt his feet give out as he fell to his knees. This was bad. If he didn't break the hold on his neck soon, he wouldn't have any chakra left. Leaning back so that Yoroi was leaning over him, Sasuke put his feet into the boy's stomach and kicked him into the air, breaking the hold on his throat. Lion's Barrage. As Yoroi was in the air, Sasuke jumped up above him and kicked him several times in the back, ending with a particularly powerful kick that sent the boy shooting to the ground. When the dust cleared, it revealed Yoroi, in a crater a few inches deep, unconscious. Stepping forward to check the boy, Gekko proclaimed Sasuke the winner and moved out of the way as the medics took him. After he was proclaimed the winner, Sasuke made his way to the rest of his team. As he passed Naruto, he gave the blonde a small nod and went to stand by his team. Once they had taken Yoroi away, Gekko turned back to the screen to wait for the next pairing. Zaku Abumi vs Aburame Shino. Nodding to his teammates, Shino made his way down to the arena and met Zaku in the middle. Even with both his arms in slings, the sound genin had a superior smirk on his face as he looked Shino up and down, while the young Aburame just stared with his normal emotionless gaze. Unlike with Sasuke and Yoroi, when Gekko jumped away, the two didn't move from where they stood. Taking his left arm out of its sling, Zaku raised it so it was pointing at Shino and shot out a blast of compressed air, the smirk on his face becoming a victorious grin when he saw that the bug user wasn't going to dodge, only for it to turn into a frown when the boy in front of him burst into a pile of bugs, with the real Shino nowhere in sight. What the hell? What happened next? Only the Jonin, Hokage and Naruto were able to follow. With speed that none knew he had, Shino had appeared behind the sound nin and, extending his wasp point that he had hidden up his sleeve, stabbed him through the stomach. The room was filled with shocked silence as Zaku stumbled forward, hand on his stomach, and turned to face the Aburame. Why, you bastard? Surrender now and you can get medical treatment, if not I will be forced to kill you, and I assure you it will not be pleasant. The smirk that stretched across Zaku's face was strained, and he was starting to sweat from the struggle to stay stood up. You think this is enough to stop me, ha? As he moved the hand away from the hole in his stomach and raised it to fire another burst of air, Shino just shook his head sadly and, raising his own hand, clicked his fingers. The sound echoed off the walls, and for another moment nothing happened. Then, without warning, Zaku started screaming at the top of his lungs and clawing at his skin in a panic. This went on for 2 minutes, and when it stopped, the young sound ninja fell face first to the ground, eyes wide and mouth open from his screaming. It was then that they all saw a large number of bugs crawling out of the boy's mouth, nose, ears and wound in his stomach and make their way back to Shino. Walking over to the downed Zaku and checking his pulse, Gekko looked up at the Hokage and shook his head. As Shino walked up the stairs back to his team, he was met with complete silence, but as soon as he was in reaching distance, the bug user was pulled into a bone-crushing hug from his blonde teammate. I'm so proud of you. I must be rubbing off on you. Hey, we should get you your own bandages. Thank you, but I will never wear bandages for anything other than an injury. Boring. The next to be shown on the board was Sakura and Ino. It was a pretty boring fight that ended in a double knockout that made Naruto laugh. After they had been taken to the medical ward, the screen yet again moved through the names and came to a stop. Higashi Tenten vs Sabaku Tamari. Again, this was another short match. Unlike with Sakura and Ino, where they were equally bad, Tenten was just not able to get past Tamari's wind. Not that she didn't try, sending wave after wave of weapons at the blonde. In the end, Tamari was able to hit her with a quick wind attack that knocked her out. Akashi Moka vs Inazuka Kiba. With an excited yell, Kiba jumped down to the floor below and ran to his spot in the middle, while the pink-haired water ninja slowly made her way down the stairs to stand in front of him with a shy look on her face. What happened next was something none would have expected. As soon Gecko had moved away, Kiba had charged at Moka with the intention of tackling her to the ground. But as soon as he came close enough to see her face, he came to a halt and stared at the girl with his mouth open and drool dripping onto the floor. Up on the balcony, Naruto had started to laugh. Turning to the deranged blonde Sasuke asks, "Do you know what's happening to Kiba? She put him in a glamour." "A what?" "It's a type of genjutsu that only affects the opposite sex. The more the victim finds the user attractive, the stronger it is. It is actually a really rare form of genjutsu that not many people even know about. Either way, dog piss is fucked." True to his words, the match was called when Moka walked up to the dog-like boy and held a kunai to his neck until the match was called. "Cute and brains, I might just take you home with me." Turning to see the white-haired Akasha standing next to him, Naruto just grinned while all the others were shocked that they didn't see her before. "How did you know? My teacher is a genjutsu specialist." The smirk that crossed the water ninja face was full of confidence. "I see. Uzumaki Naruto vs. 2. They were all confused by the name but saw one of the rain ninja making his way down to the arena. The grin on Naruto's face stretched to painful proportions and he jumped down from the balcony and landed in his spot across from the other genin. Before the match could start, the blonde reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Holding it up and flipping it, they all watched as he caught it and looked at what it landed on. The already huge grin stretched wider and he pocketed the coin. They all watched as Gecko called for the match to start, absently noticing that he was already at the side of the arena when he did so. Just out of curiosity, what was the coin for? The rain genin's voice was slightly distorted by the mask on his face, but they could all hear what he said. "I was deciding whether to kill you or maim you. Want to know what I decided?" Without saying another word, the yellow-clad genin sped through hand seals and disappeared. Naruto seemed unaffected as he calmly reached into his kunai pouch and took out a pair of black fingerless gloves. None of those watching could see them very well, but if they could, they would have saw that they were covered in intricate seals in red, and in the center of his palm was a circle with another seal inside it. After putting those on, Naruto slammed his palm down with a yell. Seal of the Seven Sins. Circle of Sloth. From the point where his hand touched the ground, a circle of blue chakra spread out over the floor, not stopping until it reached 50 feet all around him. Inside the circle was the same seal that had been on the palm of his hand, and when he stood back up, the seal stayed on the ground, casting an eerie blue glow throughout the room and under Naruto's face. No one knew what it was for, but watched with bated breath. As soon as the rain ninja stepped into the circle, he became visible again and was hit with an ungodly pressure that slowed him down. It was like walking through glue, and the closer he got to Naruto, the heavier the atmosphere became until he was unable to stand and lay on the floor at the blonde's feet. "What the hell is this?" Naruto just grinned at the boy lying at his feet and lifted his foot in the air, unaffected by the weight that had forced his foe to the ground, and stomped on his head with his bandage-covered foot. The rain ninja's skull gave way with little resistance and exploded in a small shower of gore. Looking down at the boy's body, Naruto smiled. "Kill." Just like when Shino had killed Zaku, the room fell into complete silence, and as soon as he was declared the winner, the circle faded and Naruto did reach down to pull of his victim's headband before he flipped back to his spot on the balcony. While they cleaned up what was left of the rain ninja, there was a quick intermission. Akasha had stayed where she had been throughout Naruto's match and had her usual smirk on her face, not affected by the gruesome death she had just witnessed in the least. When Naruto came and stood next to her, grin back in place, she decided to ask him what had happened. "So, what's with the gloves? Only an idiot would reveal their secrets to the competition. And, luckily for you, I'm completely insane, which is better than being an idiot. I took the idea for training weight seals and added it to my gloves. The closer you get to the center, the heavier it gets. If you don't have the counter seal, there's nothing you can do. It affects everything. People, weapons, everything. I'm impressed." "With what? Your seal? What seal?" Quote. The one you just used. Oh, that, thanks. You're not joking when you say you're insane, aren't you? If anything, it's an understatement. Throughout their exchange, the smirk on Akasha's face turned into a genuine smile and she had moved a bit closer to the blonde. XXX. What they didn't know was that a certain purple-haired woman and her red-eyed friend had been watching them the whole time. Shame he's got the awareness of a spoon. And whose fault is that? It's for his own good. Are you going to stop him from being near her? Not sure yet. I'll see what she wants with him first. For both their sakes, let's hope it's good, because if not, he's going to lose it, and Cammy knows he's been through enough. Quote. Neither of them noticed the worried look that crossed the water Jonan's face when she heard what they were talking about. XXX. The next few matches seemed to fly by. Konkuro had almost no trouble with Kabuto's other teammate, and Shikamaru was able to defeat the Sound Ninja Kin. Choji had lost to Dosu, though he did manage to make the bandaged Sound Ninja work for it. Hyuga Neji vs. Hyuga Hinata. This match had turned more than a few heads. They could all see by the way the older Hyuga had been glaring at his cousin and were interested to see what would happen. Neither of them were wearing their hands of kami, and as they stood across from each other, it was clear it would be an interesting fight. The moment Gecko moved, the two Hyuga met in a fierce battle with their clan style, the gentle fist. No words were exchanged between them for the first few minutes of the fight, just the sound of heavy breathing as they weaved in and out of each other's attacks. As the match went on, the irritation on Neji's face became more and more defined. This wasn't right. Fate had decreed he would be the winner. He was the prodigy and she was nothing. Leaping back so he had space, Neji looked at his cousin and smirked. You should just quit. You were never cut out to be a ninja. Without answering, Hinata lunged at her cousin and tried to send a strike to his left arm. Dodging the strike, Neji sent his own to her right and hit, forcing Hinata to put distance between them. You're a failure, a disgrace to the Hyuga name, and you always will be. Seeing that his words were getting to her, Neji ran towards the trembling Hinata and hit her in the abdomen, causing her to fall to her knees and vomit a large amount of blood. Thinking it was over, he turned to Gecko and was about to tell him to call the match, only to see Hinata stand shakily to her feet and prepare to fight. Seeing red, Neji charged at Hinata and for the next 10 minutes continued to beat her around the arena floor. 8 times he knocked her to the ground and 8 times she got back to her feet, until finally, Gecko called the match before she was killed. The problem was that Neji, in his rage-filled mind, didn't listen and moved in to strike her in the chest in an attempt to kill her where she stood. He never reached her. All the Leaf Jonin sensei had moved as one to intercept the boy, but before they could reach him, he was thrown across the arena and slammed into the far wall. When the smoke was cleared, it was to the sight of both Naruto and Shino pinning him to the wall, Shino with his wasp point inches from the Hyuga's stomach and Naruto, his right arm morphed into a misshapen mess of gray muscles, holding him by the throat. From the way his face was changing colors, it was obvious that the large hand wrapped around his neck was cutting off his airways and he couldn't breathe. After a moment, Sarutobi stood from his chair and turned to address the 3 boys. Let him go. For a moment nothing happened and the Jonin moved to pull them off before they killed him. Letting go of Neji, they both backed away and without a word turned to check that Hinata would be okay, Shino's weapon sliding back into his arm and Naruto returning to normal. Another show of favoritism showed towards the main branch. Both boys stopped mid-step at his words and the Jonin prepared to move to stop them, thinking they would attack him. Slowly they turned to face Neji again, both with blank expressions on their faces. The look in their eyes sent a shiver down the young Hyuga's spine. Taking a step forward, Naruto's blue eyes locked with Neji's white. Pray that you don't face either of us later on. The only reason you're alive right now is that Hinata asks us not to kill you if this happened. At the shocked look on his face, Naruto laughed and Shino stepped forward. If anyone is a disgrace to the Hyuga clan, it's you. XXX. After Hinata and Neji had been taken for medical treatment, the board selected the next matchup. Sabaku Gaara vs. Rock Lee. It was, to put it lightly, the best match they had seen so far. Between Gaara's sand and Lee's speed, after removing his weights, they almost fought to a stalemate. But Gaara proved too much for the green spandex wearing genin and he was taken away on a stretcher with a few cuts and bruises, but other than losing consciousness he was fine. The last two matches didn't last long. It had been the two girls from water versus the two boys from rain. In both matches, as soon as Gecko had gave the signal to start, the water ninja had thrown a single kunai at their opponent before they could finish their hand seals and hit them in the chest, killing them instantly. Throughout the room one thought went through everyone's minds at the same time. How the hell did they get this far? XXX. When the matches had been finished, all the genin that had won were brought to the arena floor and told to pull a ball out of a box to determine the matchups for the finals. Uzumaki Naruto vs. Hyuga Neji. Dosu vs. Aburame Shino. Sabaku Tamari vs. Nara Shikamaru. Uchiha Sasuke vs. Sabaku Gaara. Shirayuki Mizore vs. Sabaku Konkuro. Akashiya Moka vs. Akashiya Akasha. When he saw who his opponent would be, the grin on Naruto's face turned deadly and sent shivers down the spines of any that looked at it. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.